Welcome to the Symphony Podcast. Matthew and I on the show today, talking about a dark, but we're going to hopefully turn it into a light topic around death. And a conversation about death, basically, and how understanding our relationship with our mortality can change the way that we approach our life on a daily basis, and also the grand scheme, bigger life goals and decisions around career, around family, around how we want to spend our days. So I think a good place to start this conversation, Matthew, would be to ask you, what's the closest that you have come to death?
Wow. Well, the closest I have ever come to death was probably like 3 or 4 years ago at this point, when I was doing odd jobs for just in Washington when I was living up there, trying to save up money. I was doing a bunch of different odd jobs basically it's yard jobs, landscaping, moving people out of their houses, doing whatever. But I was helping this woman organize her shed, and I was up on this like 7-foot ladder or something like that. And hanging from her roof, there was like a hanging shelf. So it was like a plank of wood that had ropes attaching it to the ceiling. And I had to get up on the ladder in order to access this like big metal like cabinet thing that was just hanging out on this shelf. And so even at the top of the ladder, I was still kind of reaching up to get to this like chest thing. And I had to open it up and get the things out of it. And it was really, really, really heavy. And so I get up to the top of the ladder. I basically place one of my hands on this cabinet thing to support myself as I was going to start opening the top of it. And as I start to do that, one of the ropes breaks from the hanging shelf. And so the cabinet starts to slide down basically like toward my head, like in a way that would pin me against the wall that was behind me. And then, so I'm on the ladder holding the chest that's sliding with one arm, and then holding the ladder with my other arm, and basically realizing that there's no escape once I take my hand off of that chest without it either landing on me or just like pinning me against the wall. And at that point too, it was, I couldn't really do anything other than laugh for a second, because I was like, I had this overwhelming feeling of like, wow, if this really is it, then death really doesn't care about your timeline or your perspective or your outlook on like, oh, I'm going to live a long life. I have all these things that I want to do. Like, it really can just happen in a heartbeat. And so I was probably up there fidgeting for like 7 or 8 minutes, dude. My arm was like going completely numb because I was just trying to like mathematically figure out an escape for myself off of this ladder. And it was so bad to the point where like, even if I took one step down on the ladder, like my right arm wouldn't have been able to support the weight of this chest. Like the way that it was just, I was in such a tough position. And so finally, after like contemplating what I was going to do for like 7 or 8 minutes, I saw like an area on the ground where I thought if I jump to there, then the chest will crash like behind me, and and then it won't hit me when it hits the ground also. And it was like this diagonal, awkward jump spin move that I like had to do. And that's another thing when you're going through a situation like that, where you're just like, if anyone could see me right now, like this would just be kind of hilarious, but also devastating. And or honestly, they probably just could have helped me out. Mm-hmm. And that was another issue because nobody was home. I'm in like the middle of the woods helping this lady in her shed that's like miles away from anybody else. And so, and luckily, I mean, obviously I survived and escaped, but I jumped, the huge bin like crashed against the wall and then on the floor. And I just like sat there and caught my breath for a second and was just like, holy shit, like that. And I had this moment of like, wow, my conversations this morning with my family or with my friends, like they would have had no idea that was the last time that we would have had a chance to talk. And I kind of just had this insane wake up moment of how precious and fragile life really is. And I think ultimately that's a really important thing to feel, because I think it makes you live from a more intentional place. But I think the point of this conversation is that it shouldn't have to take these extreme circumstances or these like near death experiences or the loss of a loved one or whatever it is. Like just like it shouldn't have to take death to live from this place of knowing that it's there and wanting to live in a way where you're showing up with your best self, because life really is short and it is fragile and precious. And so I think today we're going to talk about some of those situations that have made us feel that way, but then also kind of figure out ways that we can, design our daily habits in a way that allow us to live from that centered place a little bit more often.
100%. Yeah. It is an interesting question that you bring up, which is that it's like, do we have to learn by experience? I was talking to Alondra about this today. We just went surfing this morning, and it was like, I said to her, I was like, you basically, there's all these little things in surfing that you can't really learn unless you actually experience like a solid amount of pain, whether that's like putting the board in front of you when a big wave is coming, like I did today. And it's, I got a big gash on the front, not big gash. I got a nice little slice on the front of my shin from one of the fins on my board. And I was like, that was such a dumb move. Now I know next time, like not to do that, but those are like small things. And, I heard there's so many different angles that I could bring up here, but I will say for me, I had heard a lot about DMT over the years and how when we sleep and when we die are the two times when DMT is released in the brain. And I wanted to experience, we all struggle with mortality. And even though I could tell you logically and like with language, like I understand that the fact that we all die one day and the fact that life is short makes each moment so much more valuable. Like I can consciously, like in the right side of my brain, wrap my head around that, but you can't truly understand it like until you really see that. And so you hear stories about people who have like actual near-death experiences. And I wanted to kind of like get a taste of that. And so I traveled to Denver where I did DMT for the first and only time. And if that is what death is somewhat like, then I can tell you from my experience, it is all good. Like when you die, it's all good. Every single thing that you're worried about today is gone. And you're in this place of pure goodness. Like I can't really put words to my experience, but what I can tell you is I came back into my body crying and laughing and just full of a level of bliss and joy that it's just like unfathomable, really. And I just thought about my family and my friends and how it's all good. No matter what happens to everybody, it's all good. And it's like right. That maybe someone listening to that sounds like cuckoo talk, but
I don't
that
think
for
so,
me
though.
was,
I mean,
yeah,
I think it's important to even bring up that angle too, because I mean, I haven't experimented with DMT yet. I mean, it's definitely, I would love to at some point in my life, but even with mushrooms, I feel like you kind of get a glimpse of maybe not like a full what death will be like experience, but you kind of get a glimpse of what it would mean to just kind of return to just being a piece of the energy that's going on in the world. And like, you just become more of that. Like you're not reduced to this physical body anymore. You're just more a piece of everything that's going on around us. And like, nature is such a perfect cycle, and there's so many endless examples of that. And so I think, you're really releasing your physical limitations and kind of returning to the greater Gaia energy that is responsible for everything that we're experiencing. And so I think it is all good. Like it is a good and beautiful thing. And it's like a final journey that we take as humans is like into this unknown space. But I think psychedelics are kind of a really cool entry point for people to become a little bit more comfortable with that. And I think that they're already doing research and trials with that for people who are in hospice care and are basically like at the end of their life. They're introducing psychedelic therapy for those people to basically give them a better coping mechanism as they're kind of entering this final period of their life. And I think the results have been, we should try to find an article on that and link it in the show notes. But I think the results have been pretty substantial. And I think, I don't know, it's just I think in the West, and there's different cultures have different traditions around it. And I think the West is slightly behind in some ways because we look at death as such a bad thing. most of the time, right? Or at least something that we're scared of or like sad about. And I think there's other cultures that really celebrate it, and kind of they see it as a reason to celebrate a person's life and kind of wish them well into their next journey. And so it's like, for the person dying, I think wherever you're going is all good. I think where the real pain comes is the people that get left behind. And I think that's something too that, I mean, even this past weekend, so this is another short little story, but so Roddy, I feel like anyone who's listening to this podcast knows who Roddy is at this point. My business partner, best friend, he's been on the show a bunch of times too. But he's been in Colombia for the past couple of months. And I don't remember what day it was, but he hadn't been feeling good for like 10 or 11 days. And finally, he thought he had COVID, actually, because he was just really low energy, kind of had a cold, like a little bit of nausea, like fever symptoms, and it had been going on for a while. And Roddy's like a really energetic person and like typically has no issues with that type of stuff. So he was like, okay, something's definitely wrong. Probably have COVID. Goes in to get checked. And the doctor was like, no, it's not COVID. But they took some blood tests and they were like, whoa, like you shouldn't even be walking around right now. Like the fact that you're even like up and conscious and like able to walk yourself into the hospital right now is incredible. Because, and I mean, I don't have all of the medical terms to get into it here, but I guess a normal person's hemoglobin levels in their blood is around 15. And I guess anything under 13, I think, is considered anemia, which is a condition where your blood starts kind of like destroying your red blood cells, which is basically what's responsible for providing oxygen to your body. And so a normal level is 15, under 13 is concerning and considered anemia. And Roddy was at a 4. And so basically like he's in critical condition, because anything under 6, I guess you can die from. And he had been at a 4 and kind of walking around living his day-to-day life as if nothing was wrong. So like kind of he could have dropped dead at any moment. And then he goes into the hospital and I'm kind of getting text updates of what's going on. And in my mind, I'm just like, this is insane. Like this went from, everyday business partner talking business, shooting the shit, joking around, to, hey, I'm in the hospital and kind of what is like critical condition. And then he had to get like an immediate blood transfusion. And then his body like was rejecting the first blood transfusion because his blood was still like destroying these red blood cells. So they had to do multiple and then try to get his hemoglobin levels back up. And it was just this whole fiasco. And he said that he had this moment too when he was in the hospital where his grandpa, who's dead and actually looks like, literally they look like the same exact person. He showed me a picture of his grandpa when he was about Roddy's age and literally pretty much identical. So basically Roddy's grandpa was a stud. But so I guess
Roddy's a beast.
In the moment where he was getting prepared to go into his second blood transfusion and knowing that there was kind of a high possibility that his body was going to reject it and that he was going to be in even more of a critical space, he said that he was kind of in this like in and out period of wakefulness and restfulness. And his grandpa, like a 30-year-old version of his grandpa, visited him at his hospital bed and basically just told him that it wasn't his time to go yet, that he has so much more to accomplish in his life and things that like his grandpa wished that he could have, because his grandpa died around, in his like late 30s. So this is like a young version of his grandpa telling Roddy that like he had so many things that he wanted to do in his life and that this was not Roddy's time to go yet. And then, Roddy goes through the blood transfusions and now he's still in the hospital, but like his levels are going back up and he's going to be okay. But I mean, for me, that was like a really challenging weekend to just to really feel helpless. Right. And know that, someone that you're used to talking to every day and like a really, one of my best friends, it's just like at the drop of a hat, something could be completely different. And, you might not have a chance to ever get to talk to that person again. And it makes you really reflective and it makes you not want to, mistreat those people, or it makes you not want to take them for granted. And it's like, duh, right? Because it's like everyone would say that. But it's what we were talking about before. It's like these extreme examples wake us up to what's really important in life. And so, and it kind of like makes it obvious what you should be cherishing and what you should be paying attention to, and the relationships that you should be fostering and tending to every single day, and who you should be showing up for and how you should be showing up. But, yeah, I think the main thing that I want to come away from this from is just like finding ways to kind of like live from that place, even when those things aren't happening. And so I think a big piece of that is just kind of having gratitude and actually like literally taking mental inventory, or even making it physical and writing it down in a journal of just like, what am I grateful for today? Who are the people in my life that I care about? What are the activities that serve me the most too? Because I think that's a big piece of it too. Because if you're only thinking about the other people in your life, you might neglect yourself a little bit. And so it's like, yeah, anyone in your life could drop dead at any moment, but so could you, right? So are you living the life that you want to be living? Like, are you doing the activities that bring you the most joy? Are you spending your time with the people that bring you the most joy? So I think for anyone listening to this, I think that'd be a cool activity just to kind of do for yourself, is just take a little time to reflect on that. Like, if you were going to die today, or if your best friend, family member, someone you care about a ton were to go into critical condition or pass away randomly, like, would you still be acting in the way that you are? And, or what would change? And if something would change, like, why aren't you making those changes? And there's always an opportunity to, if we're lucky. And so it's just like, let's start living from that place. Even when there's not like a huge example of why we should be.
Really well said, man. And just want to reiterate, like, right now, October 11th, Monday, we are sending good energy and positivity and love down to Roddy in Colombia. It sounds like he's in good hands, but he looks like he's going to be in the hospital for at least a few more days. So, yeah, man. And you bring up a great point, because it's like, on one hand, if you take, and I'm going to kind of like throw this back at you in a second here, but on one hand, if you say, okay, live every day like it's your last day, I get that. What would I do today? I'd probably try and like get a surf session, maybe a quick mountain bike ride, and then like go have a meal with my family, and then like maybe see a few of my closest friends. Maybe not. I don't know. No offense to any of my friends, but really, like, I'd probably spend some time with my girlfriend. But that you can't live life like that, right? You can't live life actually like it's your last day. Like, you have bills to pay, you have a career that you want to continue developing towards. So there's like there's an interesting harmony or balance to be found here, where you have to strike some spot in the middle, like, and everyone takes their own angle on it. There's one end of the spectrum is, I'm going to grind, I'm going to sacrifice my time when I'm young so that when I'm old, I have what I perceive at this time to be a better life. Mm-hmm. That scares the fuck out of me, because, man, you get old and you lose energy, and you might have money, but if you don't have energy and drive to do the things, like, you might be literally passing up, like, they say that the human body peaks at, who knows, 28 years old, maybe 30, 28 to 35 is probably like our peak physical condition. And for me, knowing that like outdoor sports and physical activities is like a lot of like why I like to live. It's like, I work hard so that when I can get time to go do physical activities, I can. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm finding something in the middle. Like, I'm definitely not like I'm just going to travel the world and basically like have nothing in my bank account, hitchhiking around the world. That's the other end of the spectrum. So I think there's like a real conversation that we all should have, and just make sure that we're aligned. Like, I even ask myself the same question, right? It's like, how aligned am I with this understanding that life is short? Am I living in alignment with that? So, man, right. Super well said. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up this angle too, because you're right. It's like, you can't you can't spend every single day doing everything that's on your bucket list and
you just max out your credit card.
Right. Like that's not realistic. And also like a proximity conversation too. Like you're probably not able to see all the people that are important to you in your life on a day-to-day basis. But what I think is most important is just like having this healthy awareness of the idea that like every single day could be your last, but you still have this life that you've been given. Right. And so it's like you still have your day-to-day responsibilities, like whether you like it or not, you still have things that you don't want to do, or situations that are going to frustrate you, or a day's not going to be going the way that you want it to go. But if you can still scrape up that concept of like gratitude for the life that you've been given and gratitude for the situation that you find yourself in, like regardless of what's going on, like I think that's where this mind frame is important, is because I don't know, and it can be so simple too. Like we had this conversation a few weeks back on the podcast about like not letting like the small things frustrate you, right? Like if you're in a long line or you're in a frustrating conversation with a customer service person on the phone, or like, and you can either let that ruin the rest of your day, or if you take this other mindset to it, it's like you might find a little bit of humor in the situation. You might find you might be able to change the conversation and crack a joke, and the other person laughs, and then all of a sudden there's this huge tension that's lifted. And it's like
humor.
I mean, I think, humor in the face of tragedy, but also humor in the face of just anything. It will always, lighten the load and make the situation a little bit better. But yeah, so I think it's more about that concept of just like, are you really living, or are you just kind of like letting things happen to you and just kind of like going, through your day-to-day life on autopilot? And I think that's the main differentiator here. It's just like, are you going to grasp the life that you've been given, or are you going to just let it happen to you? Yeah.
And then it's like, one thing that I jotted down as we were prepping for this episode was, well, does this understanding that life is short, or that it can, like, death can strike at any point? I told you just before we got rolling that last year I was in Cancun in Mexico. It was my first time in Mexico, and you're in a new country, you're not totally aware of your surroundings. I was with my partner and a few of her friends, getting out of a car on the side. So they have like basically a main road where, in my mind, like cars are going like 40 miles an hour, maybe, like pretty quick. And then they have these side roads. So you can kind of like turn, you go like from the main road to the side road in front of all the commercial businesses and stuff. And right there's parking right there on that road, like not even parallel parking, like kind of like angle in parking. So I get out of the car, it's like 9:30 p.m., probably like 10 p.m. It's dark. And I'm expecting, like, my mind is like, okay, we just parked, we're in a parking lot, and I walk around the back of the car and I'm kind of just not really paying attention. And one of Alandra's friends just goes, "Aguas," which means watch out. And fortunately, I had been with her long enough to understand what that meant. In my subconscious clicked in. I looked up and there's a bus coming at me, probably 40 miles an hour on the side street, no lights on. And I literally jumped out of the way from getting hit by this bus. And it was just like one of those moments where I didn't really fully like decompress and kind of like understand what had just happened. But I knew logically that could have literally been the end for me. Like I could have just gone on a stupid vacation to Cancun. Not stupid. I shouldn't say anything negative, but like could have just literally been on vacation, just trying to enjoy my life. And just, that could have been it. And, it's like, it's weird because you think like you don't want to like make a big deal out of it. And like the other people there, they didn't almost die. So they don't really know what that's like. And like your ego is kind of like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. Like, oh, you were fine. But man, if he didn't yell "Aguas," like I really don't know. Like I fucking don't know. And yeah, so that's just one thing that came in my head. But yeah, essentially it's like, okay, life is like very short. But if you spend so much time worrying about the fact that we're just mortal beings and we only get 2 billion heartbeats, and you can get pretty dark if you start to think about, like, if you really put statistics to like, okay, how many more days of skiing do I have in my life? How many more meals with my dad, with my mom? My grandparents are in their mid 80s. how many more times am I going to get to talk to them? And so I think you just have to make sure that like you take a positive view on these things and like make these understandings serve you, and like take the time to digest, and don't be fearful. Like I can easily see myself wanting to just like shut that down, take a rip of weed, chill out, not think about that stuff at all. But it's super powerful when you like, that's why the DMT experience was like, so just like, you can't avoid coming in contact with this understanding. So whether it's experimenting with some type of psychedelic, I don't really advocate for that, because something that doesn't get mentioned a lot, I've probably mentioned it on the show, but you just put yourself in a weird situation where like you can get involved with other entities and things that we don't fully understand. And so just be careful with those things. But I think that is one possible way to do it. Journaling is another. Having a conversation like this is super valuable. Dude, when you were talking about Roddy, and when I think about Roddy, I was getting chills, man, just thinking about it. Cause like his grandfather visiting him, like I believe that, like there's no doubt that happened. Like,
right.
Crazy. And we just released, on another side note, probably plug it here in the show notes, the Scooty Fund video. And my friend Will Scooty Taylor died by suicide March 4th, 2017. No warning signs, no one knew he was depressed. And I think it's like, what can you do after something so shitty like that happens? Or if you're lucky enough, you get a close call. But most people that are listening to this probably know somebody close to them that's died. My aunt died in childbirth when I was young, and that was kind of a wake up call. Like, man, people can just die in childbirth. And kind of like ranting all over the place here, but I do think it's important to mention, like, we're in this day and age where, like you said, the Western perspective is a little bit behind in some ways, or it's like it's gone the wrong direction, where we fear death and where we think, oh, there's all these modern technologies that will prevent us from dying. Like if something happens, like thank God we do have like a modern medical system that can, for the most part, prevent us from dying from things like pneumonia or different diseases like polio, dude. Great example, right? It's like 100 years ago, people were fucking dying left and right of pneumonia. It's like, you get pneumonia now, I don't know what the percentage of people that die from pneumonia, but if you have a solid immune system and you're in decent condition, you're going to be fine. So it can maybe be deceiving with like all the advancements in technology and the cultural shifts and things like that, to like, we've been distanced from death. And I'm here in Mexico, and I'll hand back the mic to you after my rant here. But I was talking about how we perceive death more negatively generally from my point of view than they do in Mexico. When I learned about the culture here in high school and studied Spanish, they have Dia de los Muertos. And one of the days is, to my understanding, I might be butchering this, but one of the first day is more like sorrowful and mourning. And then the second day is like a true celebration, like a celebration of the people that have come and gone, and they're going to the next chapter. And I brought up this point to a couple friends we have here. Shout out to my guy, Omar, who we met surfing last year. And he said something that I thought was really profound. It's like, we get so many experiences in life that are just awesome. Like, you know, it's nice to just like take a shit or like make love or go surfing or like whatever. Like, these are great experiences, and every single time it's a pleasure, you know, but you only get one experience with birth and one experience with death. And so there's something inherently special about something you only get to experience once, and taking a negative view on that thing that you only get to experience once, I worry that is not something that would serve a good, well-lived life. So I don't have these answers solved, but certainly having the conversations are valuable.
Definitely, like thinking about it and then thinking about how you can frame it in your own mind to, you know, be able to cope with it better. I think that's all we can really do. I was listening to an Alan Watts lecture recently where he talked about how you can take literally anything in the world, any experience, any activity, and two different people could talk about them in a completely different way. Like one person would talk about it as if it's this beautiful, like life-giving, awesome experience, and another person could make it sound horrible and ugly and terrible just because of their negative attitude towards it or whatever. And so it's like, we always have that option of like how we want to make our minds up of what it's going to be, you know? And I think that's kind of a cool invitation for people to do that with their relationship to their own mortality. Is just like, how do I want to look at this as like doomsday, or do I want to look at this as like the final journey into the, into the big unknown? That should be like a celebration of life and a continuation of the spirit, and then I think another thing that I just wanted to mention right before we sign off here too, is I was reading this book called Recapture the Rapture by Jamie Wheal, who's the founder of the Flow Genome Project. Phenomenal book. Actually, Byron put me onto it. And I'm also wearing the Soundbox shirt today, so shout out to Byron. But he was, Jamie Wheal was talking about Aldous Huxley, who just super intellectual guy. He's passed away now, but he wrote a bunch of books on, like, one's called The Doors of Perception, which is, I would highly recommend that book to anybody. He talks a lot about consciousness and psychedelics and what it does to our brain. And he just like used his life to go deep, deep, deep into that realm and came back with a lot of answers and wrote them down for people to kind of like chew on and think about. But Jamie was writing about how on his deathbed, the last thing that he said to his wife before he passed away was, above all else, be kind. And I think that that's kind of a perfect takeaway for all of this conversation as well, is just because it's like, yeah, you don't know when you're going to go. You don't know when your loved ones are going to go. You don't know when you're going to be in a situation where everything changes on a dime and you wish you had that last word that you could have said to somebody. So it's just like, just be kind, be loving, be understanding, and be open to experiences, but ultimately just be kind to others and to yourself.
Man, you're a wise man, Matthew. I love how you put that, and appreciate the perspective a ton. All right, big topic in a short period of time. I'm sure we could, and I'm sure we will go deeper on this. But yeah, super fun to talk about death. All right, we're out of here. And again, if you're listening still, thank you so much for being a part of this community. Truly, I love hearing from different folks, and got a little bit of feedback from one of my buddies, Lou, who told me he loves it when we tell stories, and encouraging us to tell more stories. And so I hope we did a little bit of that today. And cool. That's it. Till next time. Peace.
Peace.